Hello, my name is Marcin, and what's behind me is a regular, boring computer keyboard. Except it's not boring. It has all of these stories to tell you. For example, you might wonder why there are two shift keys and why they're called shift. It hasn't always been like this. An early typewriter you can see here actually has two different shifts, figures and captions, and only 3 rows of keys. And it's very weird and confusing, and it ended up being kind of complicated to use. So what if you tried something different? No shift at all, right? Look at those typewriters. They have uppercase and lowercase on the side, or uppercase and lowercase here. Super cool, right? Really easy to... I love those typewriters because the manufacturers went out of their way to tell you why shift is actually bad for you. Like, it's gonna be really confusing for your simple brain, and you have no idea what's gonna happen if something that's not on the key is not on the print, right? It's so weird. And by the way, those keys are all free, so don't worry about it. Didn't work out at all because of touch typing. It's really hard to touch type on a keyboard that has 60 or 70 keys, right? So we ended up with this thing that we know today, which is 4 rows of keys, numbers, letters, shift, shift, and shift lock. Shift, why is it called shift, right? Because you physically used to have to shift the carriage to go up and down, and it was physically demanding in the early typewriters. So we had shift lock pretty much, so it was just easier to type a lot of all caps, and it had to be physically connected to shift to hold it in place. It doesn't have to be that anymore. We still have caps lock in the same space, just because history. And we eventually ended up figuring out how to make it easier. So we started calling it floating shift with this nice script, and then power shift, like power windows and power steering, like in the cars around the same time. And by the way, I love when industries kind of converge in that way. Like look at this thing. This is an early typewriter, looks like a sewing machine, right? Like, this is enter. This is how you do enter, which sounds awesome, except, you know, it was kind of a piece of crap typewriter, to be honest. And typewriters are so easy to make fun of, right? Let's say you want more characters, well, bolt 2 typewriters together. That's how you get typewriter Unicode. That's your only option, right? And only if even if you do that, you're still probably gonna have characters that are missing, and what do you do then? You have to combine them from other characters. Like here, like look at this brace. This is like a weekend project to put it together, right? And this typewriter had an unjamming key. If your typewriter got stuck, you press this key to unstuck it. It's just so amazingly primitive, right? But on the other hand, typewriters had fonts. Some typewriters had actually physical balls of fonts you can swap, and you had like professional in the morning and then like funny scripty one. And you might say like, all typewriter fonts are lame. They all look like monospace and kind of computery, right? False. Some typewriters actually had proportional typefaces where I was like thinner than an M, and it looked like print. It was super awesome. Except when you try to do backspace, because you had no idea how far you have to go. And you might say, like, backspace typewriters doesn't make sense. You can erase something. Yes, you can. You have this special tape where you can actually leave things off that you did by mistake, which is kind of cool. Eventually, what happened to typewriters is that they became computers, and it was kind of a complicated process. It took a couple of decades. By the way, this is a computer, this is a typewriter. I know it doesn't make any sense, but that's what it was for a couple of decades. But eventually, we figured it out, and we had to do those keys that don't make sense for typewriters that we need for computers. For example, the arrow keys with arrows, and we tried everything. We tried literally just even putting a joystick, because like it's too hard to figure out what to do with keys. And there were also all sorts of other keys that came and went that I love. For example, look at this thing. Look at this. Oops, and execute, and kill, and fuck you, and all of these keys that kind of tell stories of how we used to talk to computers, and how computers talk to us, and how it continues to change over and over again up until today. And speaking of today, you might be wondering, for example, on your phone, why does the calculator go from 1 to 9 this way, but the phone goes from 1 to 9 this way, right? Anybody? So stupid. Well, it's only stupid if you don't realize the history of those devices. And the early calculators, for example, they went from 0 to 9 this way. But the early phone went from 1 to 9 this way, right? They had no idea they're going to meet in your pocket one day. They have no idea they're going to become apps, right? And now we're stuck with this complete inconsistency, and we have no idea what to do with it. And if you look at the keyboard today, there's so many more stories. Unfortunately, we don't have time to talk about all of this. Like, what the hell is a scroll lock, right? And why are there arrows here but also arrows there? So ask me later. I have all of these stories. I can tell you more. But I want to leave you with this one thing. If you take any modern keyboard, let's look at this iPad Pro. This thing is secretly 150 years old, which is awesome. So ask for its stories and show it some love. Thank you.